Welcome back to the I Empower podcast, season 2, where we hear inspirational stories and then we turn that into art that reminds us to be great. Each week, we dive deep into the story of a special person who discovered their power against all odds. But it doesn't stop there. All of the inspiration is then memorialized into a single unique painting that reminds us to be great. So if you, my friend, are looking to step out of your own way and into your life's full and well-deserved potential, this is the place for you.
Living an authentic life is so validating, and I feel that I want to be a good person just because I want to be a good person.
Yes.
There's no deeper goal. I'm not trying to get to the temple. I'm not trying to get to heaven. I just simply want to do good. It's because I want to do good, if that makes sense.
It does, 100%. I can totally 100% relate to that. Lexie, thank you so much for being with me today. I am so excited to have you on and hear your amazing story of transformation. I always like to tell my audience where I find my guests, and I actually found you on TikTok. One of your empowering posts that you made about Mormonism, is that correct? Like a faith that
yes, that is correct.
Yep. Of you actually leaving that religion. I'm not sure if I'm saying these words right, so I just want to correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, all right. So I do want to have you introduce yourself and tell us who you are.
Right. Well, yeah, I'm so excited to be here. I already feel empowered listening to just previous episodes. And so, man, I'm a fan. Not only am I a guest, I'm a fan.
Awesome.
Yeah. So a little bit about myself is I am from Tampa, Florida. I'm 24 years old. I started a TikTok almost 4 months ago. And oh my God, I never thought that I would say TikTok would change my life, and never. I mean, that sounds like a joke. But yeah, so I started telling my story about leaving the Mormon faith and how that impacted my life, how that changed my life, and how that changed me as a person. And moving forward with the interview, I kind of want to make clear that this is more about my transition. I'm not trying to diss anybody's religion, and everybody has their own beliefs, and that's fine. And I am a critic of the institution, but not the people who believe in it. So I just want to make that clear moving forward.
Right, yeah. Awesome. Yes. So, I don't know a whole lot about the Mormon religion. I've heard it. I know that another word for it, I believe, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is a branch of Christianity, also known as the Church of Latter-day Saints, I think is another.
Yeah, you did great.
I did a little research, so I knew a little bit.
You did good.
Awesome.
Yeah, so Mormonism is the more commonly known term, and then actually Mormons don't like to be called Mormons. Yeah. So LDS faith, Mormonism, same thing. You got it. So.
All right. Yeah. And so just for anybody that is not familiar with it, it's just a branch of Christianity. I know there's a lot of religions. There are tiers. It's a branch of Christianity, but then also Mormon also has branches within that as well, I saw. So I don't know if you ever get any feedback on TikTok where people are like, oh, that's not true, but I think that it's important that people realize that there are different sectors or parts, more, I was talking to my husband about this before the interview, and, I've actually interviewed somebody who was Amish, and one of the things that she said was that there are different branches of it. So there's different, I don't want to use the word severity, but different levels of super into super I don't know the word I'm trying to use, not conservative, but maybe the rules are more strict, and then it kind of tapers out.
That's exactly. And and with any faith, really, there's always some level of devoutness and level of orthodoxy. So, for example, one of the rules of Mormonism is you can't drink coffees, which is one of the most known rules of them all.
Yeah.
Some Mormons choose to drink coffee. However, that is an official rule. And I do get comments sometimes like, well, I drink coffee. I'm like, okay, well, that good for, I drink coffee too.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you, you know, but it is part of the official church's rule that you shouldn't drink any hot drinks or coffee or tea. So
Huh.
there's definitely some level of liberalism or choice when it comes to Mormonism, because there's so many rules that you have to follow in order to be quote unquote worthy, to be a worthy
Oh.
Mormon. So
Yeah. So I wanted to get that kind of like in there before we jumped into your story so that people are more understanding that there are different, it's like a spectrum. It's a sliding scale.
absolutely great
So
word for it. Yeah.
yeah. So, oh my gosh, I have so many questions for you. So I do want to just I want to like jump into your story and then we'll talk about where you are now because you're doing some incredible things now. But before we get into that, I did want to say, because like you had mentioned TikTok being like a really good platform for you. And we've talked about that before on the show of how like I'm a fan of TikTok. I love it. It's very easy to consume. But there's also like, I have found so many incredible people that I follow that just have like, it's a platform to like say your story and just to, almost like a therapeutic tool. So your experience, did you start your TikTok as a tool, or did it just kind of like, one day I'm going to just talk about this, and then it just kind of went from there?
Yeah, I actually feel like I started TikTok like every millennial does.
Yeah.
They started, I'm never going to get TikTok. That's how it started. I
Yeah.
refused to download it. You download it and then you spend hours upon hours scrolling. So that's how it started for
Right.
me.
Yeah.
So I downloaded it in August of 2020, and I deleted it back and forth. I was like, I'm spending too much dang time on this
Yeah.
app. And then from there, I actually am an independent makeup artist. So I really appreciate your focus on art. Mine's a little bit
Yeah.
different, but
Oh, yeah.
um, I originally wanted to post makeup content, and it's very hard to get your foot into the door in kind of that makeup space, the influencer. It's
Oh,
very
yeah.
hard to get your foot in the door. So there's ex-Mormon TikTok. It's kind of like a thing, and so I always enjoyed content from other ex-Mormon creators, but I was always too scared to speak up because there is repercussions of speaking up against a religion. It is.
Right. Yeah.
You
It's
really
scary.
you really ruffle some feathers, that's for
Yeah.
sure. So what I did is I posted in late June my first video, just kind of telling like my story of I was miserable for however many years, and then I left, and finally just like my eyes were just like open to this big beautiful world. In June, it is now the end of October, and I've had over millions of views. And like I'm a
Yeah.
normal person, like I don't even know how to work TikTok most of the time. So
Right. It's such a good platform. Like, a lot of times social media gets a bad rap, but I do have a lot of guests. I know myself, it's a form of therapeutic. Once you like take that step and say, okay, I'm just going to put myself in front of the camera. And especially if you have a story to tell, it's a really great platform for that. So
right,
yeah,
yeah.
I just want to like give you air high fives for that one. Cause it definitely takes, it takes some bravery to tell your story. And I think it's awesome that you were doing that, because there are a lot of people that I feel like can connect with what you have gone through, what you're going through, and see that there's definitely, there's hope at the end of the tunnel, or light at the end of the tunnel.
Right,
So
thank you.
awesome. So were you born into this religion? Can you tell me about that?
Yes, so I was born into the religion. I was born in Salt Lake, Utah, but I'd only lived there for a few months. So I don't know if that really counts. And then I grew up in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, outside there for a little bit, and then moved to Florida around middle school time. So growing up Mormon is being Mormon is not just going to church on a Sunday. It is an intense, heavy lifestyle. To name a few things, you are expected to pray every morning before you go to bed. When you wake up in the morning, you have callings in the church, which is something a little bit unique about the Mormon church, is that you're almost required to volunteer, whether you like it or not. And if you do turn down a volunteer calling, it's usually, it's very, very uncommon to do so. So, I mean, it's literally, and in high school, you go to seminary, which is a church service before high school, an hour church service before high school. So that's what I'm
Wow.
saying. It's no joke. I mean, it is a
Yeah.
full-on lifestyle where it's not just, you go to church for an hour on Sunday. It is every single day. It's influencing your mindset every single day. So before high school, I woke up at, I think, 5 o'clock in the morning. I had a class at 5:50 in the morning. It went until 6:30, and I think my high school started at 7:15. And it wasn't optional. You went, So if that's just one small example to show the lifestyle and the intensity that you're expected in order to be a quote-unquote worthy Mormon.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And so what was it like, because you're going and you're doing this with other peers, people that are your age. Did anybody else kind of be like, oh, this is kind of, I'm tired of doing this? Or was it one of those situations where you just kind of kept your thoughts to yourself?
Great question. I think it definitely kind of varied with your personality. For some people, loved it, and I was not one of those people. I got to be honest
Yeah.
with you, which is probably why I ended up where I am now. But
Yeah.
for me, I never enjoyed it. It was more I had to do it, and I was doing it because I thought it was for my salvation. It was, for me, it was out of fear. It's like if I didn't go to a church service or if I didn't follow the rules, for me it was fear-based. But for some people it's because they love it, and it just varies upon the person. But I will say, and this is my personal opinion, with the rising age of Gen Z, TikTok, social media, I think the church is decreasing in the orthodoxy, and it's leaning a little bit more liberal because people are having so many issues with policies and rules.
Yeah.
And oh, so what is wrong with coffee,
Right. Yeah, I know. That was like one of my questions because, again, I'm speaking on the Amish culture. That was one of the things and a lot of things that you're saying is reminding me of my guests that I had spoke to that experienced that. And, hot drinks or caffeine, I guess maybe is a thing. Do you know the reasoning behind that? Is it because could be considered like altering your body almost with energy or something?
So it's a little funny because most people think a common misconception is that Mormons aren't allowed to have caffeine, but that's actually not the case. Mormons, instead of drinking coffee or hot tea or any kind of alcohol or any sort of that stuff, they drink energy drinks or Diet Coke. That's kind of like the joke. The running joke is that you're not drinking coffee, which has been a proven source for antioxidants, and then you go drink a giant Bang. It's kind of ironic. So that, I think that's why people have like a lot of questions. But the theory behind it, and there's not a straight answer, to be totally honest with you. It's more of we don't know the answer now, but maybe
we'll know
when we get
later.
to heaven. Yeah, exactly. Which to me seems a little fish. It seems a little fish. I'm not gonna lie. Okay.
Right.
But yeah, the answer to why Mormons can't drink coffee is because it's a hot drink, and hot drinks aren't good for you.
It's so interesting.
There's not a clear answer, but I think the most common one is just we don't know right now, but God gave us that, and so we need to follow it.
Yeah.
So kind of follow a little blindly.
Right. Which could be super confusing for anybody that has, like, when you say these things, and it's easy for us on the outside to say, well, that doesn't make sense. And why didn't you question that? But, when you're growing up in a lifestyle that is your family, your family's involved with it. And I'm sure that it makes it difficult you might question it in your own mind, but then of course, then they put that fear behind it. And I'm just speaking I didn't grow up like super heavy religious, and I've said this before on the podcast, but when I was a young adult, I joined a Free Will Baptist church. And even though I feel like it was not as intense as some other branches of Christianity, there were a lot of things that were talked about that I was just like, I don't understand why you're saying this. When you talk about the LGBTQ community, and a lot of people, say that people that are, and then even sometimes some branches, it's interracial marriages or relationships, saying that gay people don't go to heaven. And I remember sitting there and just being like, that doesn't sound like a God that I want to serve, or who I picture God is. If you're telling me he's all loving and all this, but then you're saying he's going to punish me for a sin, yet, you say Jesus Christ died for my sins. So like, what is it?
You said exactly my feelings.
Yeah.
I don't want to serve a God who discriminates and takes love away from people. I mean,
Right.
if that's a sin, oh my God. I mean, I can't, love is the most powerful thing like on this earth. So why would
Right.
God only allow that for some people? If God is all loving,
Yes.
it seems that God was selectively loving. So
Yeah.
that was a big issue for me.
So at what age would you say that you started to feel like this was not you, that this was a lifestyle, or you started questioning and really trying to, battle with yourself on making the decision to leave?
Oh, yeah. So when I was 20 years old, actually, when I first got married is when I started to question things. So Mormons go, so there's a Mormon church where you go on Sundays, and that's where you do your typical routine Sunday service. You have your funeral potatoes there, and you have your big, that's where everybody is.
Yeah.
But then you go to the temple, which is like the mega church, to get married. And you have to be worthy, quote unquote worthy. You have to be interviewed and to see if you're living the correct lifestyle so that you're worthy to enter the temple. Okay.
Wow.
So, and I got engaged after 3 months of knowing my fiance at that time. And that's a very cultural kind of thing that you just get married quick.
Right.
But in the temple, there's rituals that are non-consensual. I won't say on here, but I encourage you to do your own research if you're curious, because it was traumatizing. It was absolutely traumatizing. And I was like, what I signed up for?
Yeah. I have to do this. Oh my goodness.
Right. So it was definitely, that was my first red flag. And then from there, after I was 20, I was married for a year. I was having a really rough year because I was 20 years old. 20-year-old marriage, don't encourage it.
No, you're still a child. I feel like when I look back at my 20-year-old self, I'm like, what?
Right. I'm still a child. I'm 24,
Yeah.
So from there, I went to church like after a year, but once again, kind of like that point that we were talking about earlier, I never really enjoyed it. I just was going through the motions because I felt like I had to, there's this big push in the Mormon church. The Mormon church is true. We are the one true church. And so I felt that fear that I had to keep on going. But around 22 years old, I had a traumatic incident happen, and my dad, here's a little trigger warning for suicidal ideation. He attempted suicide, and that really shook up my entire life. It took up my faith system. So what had happened is Mormons aren't allowed to drink alcohol, and it turns out my dad was a secret alcoholic for 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that was just shocking to, like that kind of like the reality of like, oh my gosh, I was lied to for 7 years. What else have I been lied about?
Right.
So after that happened, I kind of shifted my mind into being more open into full truth, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So from there, I actually started listening to podcasts, ironically enough, about people sharing their stories. And one important note to say is that Mormons are not allowed to listen to anti-Mormon quote unquote material. So if a Mormon were to be listening to this, it would probably be against like their rules, or they're being a little, frisky, but Mormons are not allowed to look up outside sources. So the church gives you, you're allowed to use this for your sources. You aren't allowed to study and do your own research. And I started feeling a little bit rebellious. I was like, why can't I do my own research? Why can't I know the full history and have full consent of what actually went on in the Mormon church? And from there, I started learning that the Book of Mormon, it had Anachronisms, which is, for example, it's kind of like saying Abraham Lincoln had a cell phone. That the time frame doesn't match up. Same thing with the Book of Mormon. It's placed however many thousands of years ago, and they're having these new technologies, and it's like, a little suspicious. And so after coming to the full conclusion of really the damage done in the polygamy, you're not allowed to know about the polygamy. Joseph Smith had 38 wives. Don't quote me on that one. I think it's 30 something. But you're not allowed to know that, and finding out that information is shocking. And And it's true, it's finally accepting science over my own feelings. I placed facts and science over my own personal upbringing, and my own personal thoughts. So that's when things really started to shift and change, is really prioritizing science and facts and history over my own personal thoughts.
Yeah, which is incredible for you to, because a lot of, not necessarily just religion, but I know that all religions do, well, I'm not going to say all, because I don't know about all religions, but I know that there's a lot of branches of Christianity that create that fear. And that, we know that just as like a normal person, that like fear is very controlling. So if you have a fear of flying, you're not going to want to get on a plane. So, using fear tactics to kind of control people. And, there's a lot of branches of Christianity that does that to people. So I just want to I want to say I'm so proud of you for, finding that or having that curiosity and being brave enough to venture and check it out and see ultimately what's best for you, because that's the biggest thing, is that, living your life in an authentic way that you feel confident and comfortable with. So I just think that's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
I think that's awesome.
Definitely changed. I now see both sides, if that makes sense. I see, I lived as an Orthodox Mormon growing up. I was fully invested. And that's one kind of thing on TikTok when people are like, what kind of Mormon was you? I was like, oh, I was a good Mormon. Trust me, I followed all the rules. And to live 100% not the lifestyle. And I can compare the two, 100% in and 100% out, and living an authentic life is so validating. And I feel that instead of having to be good to people, to check off a list, to make sure that I'm completing my monthly service, I want to be a good person just because I want to be a good person.
Yes.
There's no deeper goal. I'm not trying to get to the temple. I'm not trying to get to heaven. I just simply want to do good. It's because I want to do good, if that makes sense.
It does, 100%. I can totally 100% relate to that. That's a beautiful thing to say. We need more of that. Authentic, actually genuinely caring. So, the podcast is very much about women empowerment and, helping us help other women to feel powerful. So one of my questions for you with growing up Mormon is it's a very modest lifestyle, right? So how was that growing up for you compared to where you are now? Because you are into the art of makeup. So I'm assuming that that would have probably, if you would have stayed that in that lifestyle, that this would not have been something that you could have achieved, correct?
It depends. Once again, it's kind of like on that spectrum of some people don't. Some people think it's wrong, or, you shouldn't, it's not about the way that you look. But I always kind of was like, screw that. Like, I'm doing what I want.
Right.
So yeah, yes and no. I think
Okay.
I don't know where I would have gone. But in terms of modesty, so Mormons are not allowed to show their shoulders. So I think right around mid 45-degree angle you're not allowed to show any more shoulder than that. So there's kind of the running joke of porn shoulders. Don't show your porn shoulders.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to show your waist. Your clothes can't be too tight, and your shorts can't come above your right above your knee. So it's a very modest lifestyle. And mind you, I live in Florida.
Right.
It is hot. So I think the kind of the modesty culture, the purity culture, absolutely has damaged the way that I viewed myself when I was Mormon. In fact, I struggled with an eating disorder for years. Because I was just so ashamed. I was trying so hard to cover up my body all the time. And even if I did, show my porn shoulder, I felt really uncomfortable, ooh, I'm being really, I'm being real scandalous right now. So instead of just being proud of my body and, accepting everybody is perfect, I always try to cover and hide and, conform to somebody else's rules on how I should look. And, I'm not doing that anymore. If someone wants to look at my shoulder, they can look at my shoulder. It's okay.
Yeah. Is the reason for that, for the modesty, is it to, which I know that we still battle with a lot of this, like school dress codes and things like that, and victim blaming, saying that I'm causing him to have dirty thoughts or, you know, be aroused, so it's my fault, I should cover myself up. Do you think that that's kind of like rooted from like the reasoning why they want women to be modest and to cover themselves up?
1000%. 1000%.
Yeah.
I believe one of the Mormon church leaders at one point said, "You are walking pornography if you are not dressed modestly."
What?
I mean, it's intense.
Yeah.
It is very, very intense, the modesty culture.
Yeah.
And not so much that you're breaking rule culturally. There's so much judgment if, you know, "Ooh, I think she's showing a little 2 inches above her knee than she should have," you know.
Yeah.
So it is, not only is it a rule, like you are absolutely, you know, very strict on that. Culturally, there's a lot of judgment that comes with if you're not dressed to the T, quote unquote, modest. So
Right. Which, you know, goes back to the whole victim blaming and just like and my experience again with heavy Christianity is the male figure is the dominant one. So you basically have to conform to make sure that he's okay. So like, you know, he doesn't need to sin because thinking of sex or being aroused by someone that's not your wife is a sin. So you need to dress appropriately, how we say is appropriately, so that you are not causing him to sin. And it's like, what?
that's not how this works.
That's not how that works. Like,
And
I
actually,
can't.
on one of my TikToks, I talked about it. This is one of my more viral TikToks. Is my parents? It's pretty common in Mormon culture to invite the Mormon missionaries, so the two guys in a suit on a bike, over for dinner, and you feed them. And one day I was wearing track shorts, just like normal Nike track shorts, and I had
Right.
to go change because they're above my knee. And it's like,
Yeah.
what are you teaching me as a high schooler, or however old I was, that I need to go change for when these two guys come over? What kind of message do you think you're sending to your kid about their body and that their worth is based off track shorts? I can't.
Right.
I
Oh my
can't
gosh.
follow you.
Yeah. We could like I totally can, you know, go on about this forever. I can think of a time, you know, Free Will Baptist. I went to a church that I felt like was more open. Like the women didn't have to wear dresses, and if the men wanted to wear blue jeans, they were okay. However, if you were a woman and you were going to sing on the altar, you could not wear pants. And I always thought that was the weirdest thing in the world. And then I never questioned it though. It's odd because like you just say, okay, well that's the rule because that's
Right.
what they said. So I'm not
Right.
no one questions it. And then when you get out of that and you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. So I'm, you know, now my wheels are turning. I'm like, is that because, you know, there are men in the audience or in the pews that could potentially be aroused by a dress? I mean, I don't know. Well, no, that wouldn't make sense because then I think you had to wear. I don't know what it is. So again, back to the whole, like, sometimes we just don't question and we just go along with it until we decide that
Right,
this
and
is not
that's where
for
the
us.
power lies, is in questioning, going against the grain. And that's where the power lies, is, you know, questioning it and being the one fish that swims upstream, you know, instead of just conforming, is really there's so much value in questioning, and not just even religion, just
Right.
anything, you know.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's how, you know, all these great discoveries happen, is because someone questioned the norm and decided to, you know, dig a little deep and figure it out. So
Right.
I love that. That's really great advice. So just quite, you know, don't suppress the curiosity. So I know that there's been a lot lately circulating around purity culture and everything that goes behind that. What's your experience with purity culture?
I don't have anything positive to say about purity culture unless it is your choice. If you choose purity culture meaning that your value is, there's a lot of value placed on how pure you are, whether you dress or how you act or so forth. But I find purity culture to be toxic because it places your worth in something natural, if that makes any sense. It places your worth in the wrong place, if that makes sense. I think purity culture is putting a lot of weight on things that you do and not just inherently you as a person, if that makes sense. So if I were to go, dress immodestly, or if I were to have premarital sex and I'm now considered unworthy, and that's just simply not the case. You are worthy. You are inherently worthy. And that's all one of the actually big criticisms I have of the church is that term of worthiness is what you do and and how well you are following rules and how well you are following purity culture. I believe that everybody is inherently worthy, just being simply themselves. And I just say that's just so obvious to me. Hello, like
Right. Yeah. I feel
it's
like,
obvious to me
yeah.
now that I left, but
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I totally agree with that. And I think that that's a lot of, even religion aside, there's a lot of people that just are not open to the idea that everyone is worthy of having an amazing life. And, if there is something in the afterlife, like that we're all worthy of that too. So, yeah, I
right.
love that idea. Do you think so purity, again, because I didn't grow up heavy in religion, so I'm curious, that's more of like I don't know if using the word grooming is a good word, but like grooming children to be obedient adults. Do they start the purity culture young where they're telling, how to dress, not to think sexual thoughts, not to be sexual, don't do anything like kissing, holding hands. Like sometimes it's even as far as that. Don't, in any kind of intimate relationships, as in holding, hugging, kissing is a big no-no, right?
That is absolutely correct. In the Mormon church, on the most extreme end, the purity culture is intense. I mean, it really does start, actually children and start singing about purity culture in their classes, their Sunday school classes, their primary. My body is a temple, and if you, God forbid, something terrible happened to a child,
Yeah.
your temple is now wrecked. And that's the message that they're sending across. It's why are we talking about children's bodies being temples? No,
Yeah.
no. So yeah, it absolutely starts, especially when you're a teenager and when you're in high school. Just the amount they start actually interviewing you when you're 12 years old, about questioning, are you following all the rules? And they actually ask you. So the rule for purity culture is the Law of Chastity. So that's the name for it. So actually, grown men, believe it or not, take children, young girls, young boys, into usually a room with a closed door and ask them if they're following the Law of Chastity. I will say actually a lot of Mormons are critical of this too, but not everybody is. Some are, some aren't. But
Yeah.
however, it's still going on. It's still going on to this day. And actually, one critic of the Mormon Church, Sam Young, he came out with this whole movement, protect every child, because he just thought this was so inherently wrong, and it is. A grown man asking a child about their sexuality and what they're doing behind a closed door is wrong. And guess what the church did to him? They excommunicated him. They kicked him. They literally kicked him out of the church because he was, protecting children.
Yeah, because he was bucking the system. Or questioning the system.
Exactly, and and that's where I have a big hard time grasping that. Like
Yeah.
it, I don't want to dabble into the world cult because I know that could be intense for some people, but
It's a trigger word or a hot word for some people.
for sure. So I'll use high demand religion that tends to work a little bit better with people. Um, but if you're questioning a church and an institution about the safety of children and you get kicked out, oh, red flag,
Right. Wait a minute.
Right.
Yeah, most definitely. That's wild. Oh my gosh. So now that you are not in this lifestyle anymore, is your family still like, can you tell me like when you left, like what did that look like for you?
Oh, it did not go well, I'll tell you that.
No, yeah.
And I will also say my parents are not a fan of the TikTok, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so when I left, my parents did not take it well. I wouldn't want to say they disowned me, but it definitely dabbled into, the disappointment and how could I do this? And I'm wrong and the shame and the guilt. Why would I question? How could I think this? So I didn't talk to my family for months and almost years. And the relationship since I've left the church has not been the same. And I had
Yeah,
to draw, a lot of it is my own doing too, because I had to draw boundaries
right,
of what we can talk about, what we can ask, and I will not be shamed for leaving the church, and I will not shame them for staying in the church.
right.
And I'm not a perfect person, and neither is my family. We've definitely had discussions where we just simply do not agree.
Yeah,
And I think with time it has gotten a lot better. We just don't talk about it because we can't without arguing and it becoming contentious. There's no productive conversation when it comes to the church. So
yeah,
occasionally I'll ask, because my mom is a volunteer with the girls of the church, and it's like, how's that going? Out of
yeah,
respect,
yeah.
because I know that's important to her, and she doesn't ask me about. Which I don't blame her.
Right.
um, Right. So, I talk to my mom occasionally with boundaries, and the relationship has gotten a lot better since I've left the church. But I don't speak to any of my extended family, my brothers, or my dad. So it's just my
Yeah.
mom.
Wow. I mean, that's like that. I can imagine that that would be a difficult thing to do when you make that decision to, because not only does it affect you, but it also affects your family. And I think a lot of times that we put ourselves on the back burner for fear of how a family member is going to feel, especially your parents. So, I mean, what you did is incredibly brave. And I just, it definitely gives hope to anyone out there that is experiencing anything similar, and not just Mormonism, but, any kind of point in their life where they just feel like they're not doing living up to their full potential. And having
Right.
the bravery to just, say, you know what, like this is not for me anymore. So I'm going to live how I feel comfortable living. And the repercussions sometimes are deep. And I just think that, I do love that you still are able to communicate with your family, but there are a lot of people that don't get that opportunity.
Oh, absolutely not. And the sad part is that I see them as victims in themselves.
Hmm.
The cultural shame that comes with a child who leaves, the fold, the church. I feel bad for them. I really do, because I understand they probably put a lot on themselves. Like, where did I go wrong?
Right.
They don't see it as, I'm a happier, healthier, no, I'm a better person. They don't see it like that. And I have to look at through their perspective. They think they lost me. I'm a lost soul now, and
Right.
they probably that probably weighs really heavy on them. And
Absolutely.
with time I've been able to see that perspective, but and that's just where we simply don't agree. So I'm doing great, I'm living my
Yeah.
best life finally, and
Right.
they just see me as a lost soul, and that's just not the case. And so they're definitely getting a lot of slack and a lot of shame that I am a critic and speak out against the Mormon Church. They're victims of it as well.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I do feel a little bit guilty.
Yeah, I can relate to what you're saying there. I mean, I just remember being in church, and I think that this probably is easy to say. It's a blanket statement for a lot of Christianity. I remember sitting in church, and members would say, well, my daughter, she's lost and she quit coming to church. So like they just paint this, they think in their head that it's like the worst thing possible because they're not coming to church anymore and they're not, but like, and it was easy for me to feel pity for them and say, oh gosh, I'm going to pray that they come back. But, and, being on the outside where I'm at now and looking at that, and it's like, like some people just need to live the life that they want to live.
Right, and your church attendance does not equate to how worthy you are as a person, or how
Yep.
good you are, or your morale. And
Yep.
I wish that conversation was had more of church attendance does not mean you're a good or bad person.
Yeah.
It's just not for everybody. And if it brings you peace and happiness, good for you. It did
Yeah.
not bring me peace or happiness.
Yeah. Well, or
Definitely in other
even
ways.
absolutely. And even just like faith, because there are a lot of people that have decided that they didn't like the way that their church was going, or the rules that they had, or the way that they talked about their own personal God. And, some people just need to get out of that environment and decide how they want to view their God. And it could be different. And that doesn't mean that they have lost their faith, per se. It's more of they just didn't like what you were teaching and saying that how you felt like God was. My God isn't like that. My God is not a vindictive, vicious person that punishes people for things that are out of their control.
We are on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
I could not agree more.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Could not agree more.
So how are you now? I did go back through and watch a bunch of your TikToks, and I see that you have a bachelor's in biomed science.
Yeah, I do.
Ah, that's awesome.
So I recently graduated from USF with my degree in biomedical sciences. And then I actually, I wanted to go to nursing school. And even when I was in my first bachelor's, I wanted to switch, but my parents discouraged me.
Yeah.
So it's a really expensive mistake, but I am going back to school now. So I'm a full-time nursing student at the moment, and COVID kind of really, I've always wanted to do it, but COVID was kind of that final push. I really wanted to help people and get into that profession. Yeah. So I'll be graduating again in December of next year, if everything works out. Fingers crossed.
That's awesome. I mean, I think what you're doing is amazing. And then you definitely have a passion for makeup, which I think is awesome. So
Thank
you're a living example of bravery and living the life that you want to live. And I just think that's awesome.
Oh, thank you. I think it's such a hard conversation. And I think that's a lot of reason why I started my TikTok of the stigma against people leaving any religion, especially the Mormon church. It's very uncommon. There's a lot of shame when it comes to leaving the church or not being religious enough, or if you're not religious, you're not a good person. I wanted to speak up about that stigma, and really, in addition, harmful policies. I think that we think church is, like angels singing, and but that's not always the case. There are harmful policies, especially in the Mormon church, that hurt people, especially the LGBTQ plus community, and also people of color. There's so many policies that have just hurt people, and because we throw out the word church, it's okay, and that's just not the case. That's not the case. So
I almost feel like to some extent it creates it can potentially create racism and homophobia and things like that in people that maybe would have not even felt that way, but they're in their church environment that's telling them it's a rule, so you got to follow the rule. It's just like you said, there's a lot of harmful policies, but there are also a lot of churches that are out now that don't feel that way and don't teach that way. So, I do think that there is hope for people that like that community aspect of religion and want to find a place. I just think that it's just one of those, you have to do your research to find a space that you feel like fits the lifestyle that you want to live.
Certainly. And it's definitely a little bit more niche, that's for sure. And I feel like loving somebody with no barriers should be mainstream, regardless of what church you attend or not attend.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have a few questions that I like to ask all of my guests. So if you don't mind, we're going to jump right into that.
Sure.
All right. So what is the best piece of advice that you have ever been given?
Oh, okay. So question. Let me think about that one.
Yeah.
I think the best advice is don't be afraid to go against the grain and to speak your truth. Obviously that kind of aligns heavily with my story, but it's don't let other people's lifestyles cage you, I guess. And I think it's just so important that we be authentic and we are able to live our best life. So I guess that just not being caged and just do you, I think is probably the best advice.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome advice. I think that anybody could totally take that and use that into their own life. What's the best piece of advice that you would give a younger version of yourself who is in the thick of struggle if you had a few moments with them?
Um, I've actually thought about this quite a bit. My childhood was, um, and it, I feel like on the outside I had like a perfect picturesque Mormon family. We all went to church every Sunday, but going home, it was not always like that. There was a lot of narcissism, mental manipulation when I'd go home. Emotional abuse and physical abuse too. So if I could go back to my younger self, I would definitely just keep pushing. Things do get better. I know that sounds so cliche and so cheesy, but I just remember in high school one day, I was like, I don't think I'm ever gonna make it. Like I really don't think, like, I was just so mentally broken at some points in my life where I really thought this is it. This is my life. I'm just gonna be miserable, and I think that's very common for a lot of people, especially for those of minorities or just people in general. It's just simply giving up. And if I could go back and tell my younger self, I would be like, there's hope. There, as cliche as that is, we all go through dark times in our life, and it always, there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I mean, I was miserable for 22 years.
Yeah.
And up until I really left a Mormon church. I mean, I had happy moments, of course, but 22 years of thinking that it was never going to get better, and just simply being depressed and miserable. My mental health was not good, but the light was found. And I mean,
Yeah.
it took a really long time, and I did lose hope, thinking that life was just never going to get better, and it does. It really does. So that's kind of my advice
Yeah.
to yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, because, you said 22 years and you're 24, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, you're basically still in the infancy of the healing process. And I think that it's important that people understand that, like, healing happens every day. One of my guests said that, and I think it's one of the best things that, like, anyone could ever say. And it just really makes us realize that, that healing does happen every day, and that it's a journey, and just try to, take that a day at a time, basically. So,
Right. That's really great. I love that. I'm gonna change my
yeah.
answer back to that one, actually.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like when she said that, I was like, "Holy shit, you're completely right." Like there's really, you know, a lot of times we want to look at that finish line and say, "Okay, I got to get to that finish line," but like when you went through so many years of trauma and hurt, and you need to heal, like it literally, like your body physically heals every day. Like it's constantly reproducing cells and making yourself new. So like there is no like, okay, I'm here, I'm healed. I feel like it's definitely a journey. It's a life journey, and just being okay with that and being gentle with yourself every day.
Yeah, that's
So
beautiful.
I
That
just
is
want, like, I just wanted to say that to you because I think that, again, you're so brave, and you're still in the early infancies of, dealing with and processing the things that you went through. I just wanted you to know that, like, yeah,
Oh, thank you.
healing
I love
happens every
that.
day. So just don't, it's easier for us. I know I still have with my traumas moments where I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I thought I was over this, and they flare back up, and then you have to just be like, okay, I got to take some time for myself. So like just the other week I went off social media for a few days. It was like I need it. So
Right, and I think with TikTok too, talking such like a controversial like topic,
oh
like
yeah,
the comments, whoo,
yeah.
just the other day I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, okay, I'm gonna stop reading those for a few minutes,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I know that I mean, and again, my TikTok is not what your TikTok is, but I just remember I did a painting during, I think it was probably during COVID. It was of Jesus. It was a print of Jesus. It was an old print that my husband had found in an attic in New York, and he brought it back to me so that I can like make some art on it. And so the painting or the print was like so old that like I couldn't physically paint on it. It was falling apart. So I made a copy of it and then just like revamped a picture of Jesus. And everyone lost their mind on TikTok. They were like, "You ruined it. I can't believe you did that. He didn't need fixing. He didn't." And I'm like, I literally just like made it like something today's time, like bright colors and like, just being an artist. And so I had to like say, okay, I'm not reading these comments anymore.
Yep, I'm done, and sometimes that's okay.
Yep, and I think that is important too. That we talk about the good and bad sides of social media. There's always someone that's gonna have an opinion about something, and you just have to be like, okay, I'm just not, I'm not gonna read them anymore because, we can say that we have thick skin and we can try really hard, but I think sometimes it can get to you if you intake too much of it. So.
Oh, for sure. And especially when it's personal. Like that's like,
Yeah.
I mean, you can criticize my beliefs and we can have discussion and, you don't have to believe what I believe. In fact, I don't think everybody should.
Right.
I think that there's beauty in differences of opinion.
Yeah.
But once you start attacking the way that I look or, the way that okay, you're getting blocked,
Yeah. Goodbye.
Right.
Not so nice to know you, but yeah, most definitely. There are some people that just, I think it was Gary Vee that said to have sympathy for people that take time out of their day to say ugly things to other people because something obviously is going on in their life that is detrimental or just so bad that they feel like they need to project that onto somebody else. So like, I've tried to like take that in and say, okay, that makes sense. I'm going to have sympathy for that person that left a nasty comment. And I'm just going to move on with my life.
Right. And it's usually user 242, blah, blah.
Exactly. Yeah,
too.
Like that's their whole sole purpose is to be a troll. So.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I do have one last question. That is my favorite question that I like to ask everyone. We like to talk about power and not thinking of that as a bad thing. And that's something that we're trying to change with the podcast. We think of power, people in power. It's always kind of got this negative like stigma to it. And we're trying to turn that over and make it brand new. So how would you describe or what would you think of the type of power that you have to step into every day?
Great question. For me, I think there's power in confidence, and I think there's power in vulnerability and being wrong, actually. The best thing that has ever happened to me in my life is that I was wrong about something, and I'm okay with that. I was wrong about something I thought was really right for 22 years. Yeah. I think there's a lot of power in being okay with being wrong about something and admitting that and moving forward. I think leaving the church, I have so many regrets. That's something I really struggled with, what I believed before, and my lifestyle and just my choices, and just being, I was just simply wrong. I didn't make a lot of good decisions and I would change a lot of that. But I think there's power in this. I cannot change it, but I'm going to be a better person from here on out. I'm going to speak out about it. And that's where the power lies.
That's beautiful. I love that so much, Lexie. I want to thank you endlessly on behalf of our team and every single person that heard your story and connected with it. After the podcast, I will head straight to my easel and create a painting that represents what I personally felt and saw from your incredible story of transformation. Of course, if anyone is interested in seeing that process, you can follow us on Instagram and we will continue the story there. But yes, thank you so much, Lexie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm ready to go. And thank you so much for what you're doing too. I really, it's hard to see the amount of lives that you're affecting because you can't always put faces with it. But what you're doing is really incredible too, and I'm so happy to be part of it.
Oh yes, I'm happy to have you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I want to thank my guests again for sharing their incredible story of transformation with us. I'm going to link their social medias below so that you can give them a follow. And of course, if you guys felt personally connected to the story and you would like to support the podcast by purchasing one of the limited edition prints that goes along with it, you can do so at my new website. It is iampower.club. And of course, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at iampowerclub. And lastly, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss next week's episode of I Am Power. We will see you then.